The billionaire's mother humiliated his ex at a charity gala, but one DNA test changed everything. The DNA report sat on the mahogany desk between us, and I watched Vivienne Raymond's face drain of color as she read the results. Her perfectly manicured hand trembled slightly as she set down the paper. "You're lying," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is fabricated. Some desperate attempt to—" "It's real," I interrupted quietly. "Your sister Caroline, the one who ran away 30 years ago when she was 18 and pregnant, the one you spent 3 decades pretending never existed. That was my mother, which makes me your grandniece. Your blood. The family you claimed I was never good enough to join." Martin stood beside me, his hand at the small of my back. A united front against the woman who had spent 3 years trying to destroy me. Vivienne's eyes darted between the document and my face, searching for the lie she desperately wanted to find. "I didn't know," she finally managed. "I didn't know Caroline had a daughter. I didn't know you were—" "Would it have mattered?" I asked. "When you poured wine down my dress at that charity gala, when you threatened my mother's healthcare to drive me away, when you called me genetically inferior trash. If you'd known then that I was your sister's granddaughter, would any of it have been different? Or did you reject me for being poor, not for lacking the bloodline you claimed to value?" The silence that followed was devastating, because we both knew the answer, but I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how we ended up in that study, how one DNA test unraveled 3 years of cruelty and exposed a family secret that changed everything, I need to take you back. Back to the night it all started. Back to the moment when Vivienne Raymond decided I wasn't worthy of her son. Back to the charity gala where my humiliation became Denver's elite entertainment. Have you ever had someone look at you like you were dirt on their shoe? Like your entire existence was offensive to them? That was Vivienne Raymond, billionaire, philanthropist, and the woman who destroyed my relationship because I committed the unforgivable sin of being born poor. But here's what she didn't know when she orchestrated my public humiliation. I was exactly what she claimed I wasn't. And the truth, when it finally came out, didn't just vindicate me. It destroyed her. This is the story of how karma works in the most unexpected ways. How second chances are real when people are willing to change. And how the most powerful woman in Denver learned that class and bloodline aren't the same thing. If you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or told you don't belong, this story is for you. Hit that like button right now because we're about to watch revenge serve itself. And trust me, you won't want to miss how this ends. The champagne flute shattered against Italian marble with a sound that cut through the string quartet like a gunshot. I stood frozen in the grand hall of the Denver Museum of Contemporary Art, watching Chateau Margaux drip down my chest, soaking into the neckline of my mother's vintage Chanel dress, the dress I'd worn like armor, the dress that was supposed to make me feel like I belonged. Every head in the room turned toward me. 200 of Denver's wealthiest elite, their conversation stopping mid-sentence. The music faltered. In that terrible moment of silence, I heard only my own heartbeat and the steady drip of wine hitting marble. "I'm terribly sorry," Vivienne Raymond said, her voice carrying that particular register of wealth that made apologies sound like dismissals. "How clumsy of me. Though I suppose these charity events do attract all sorts of people these days. One must be careful where one stands." The words were acid wrapped in silk. Everyone within earshot understood exactly what she meant. "You don't belong here. You never did. You never will." My hands trembled, not from the cold liquid soaking through fabric I couldn't afford to dry clean, but from the effort of keeping those hands at my sides instead of around Vivienne Raymond's perfectly moisturized throat. I'd known attending tonight was a risk. I'd known that 3 years hadn't been long enough to erase me from the Raymond family's collective memory. But the Children's Hospital Foundation had honored my work. They'd given my pediatric research lab a significant grant, and I'd thought, foolishly, desperately, that professional achievement might finally outweigh personal history. I'd thought wrong. "Mrs. Raymond," I managed, my voice steady despite the humiliation burning through my veins. "No harm done. If you'll excuse me." I turned to leave, to salvage whatever dignity remained, but her voice followed me like a knife between the shoulder blades. "Teresa, darling, before you go." She paused, making sure she had maximum audience. "Do give my regards to your mother. I hear she's doing so well at the Sunrise Care Facility, such a lovely place for people of limited means, though I imagine the costs must be quite burdensome on a researcher's salary." I stopped walking. The threat was unmistakable. Vivienne Raymond sat on the board of Sunrise Care. One word from her, one concerned phone call about payment capabilities, and my mother would be transferred to a state facility, the kind of place where patients wore hospital gowns that didn't quite close, where they spent their days staring at walls painted the color of institutional despair, where the staff was overworked and the care was minimal, and my mother's Alzheimer's would accelerate in an environment of neglect. My spine straightened. I turned back slowly, meeting Vivienne's ice-chip eyes with something that felt like hatred but tasted like grief. "She's doing beautifully, thank you," I said quietly. "As am I, despite your family's best efforts to ensure otherwise." The silence that followed was the kind that precedes explosions. Vivienne's expertly applied makeup couldn't quite hide the flush creeping up her neck, the rage of someone unaccustomed to having prey talk back. She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a register meant only for my ears, though at least a dozen people were straining to hear every word. "My dear girl, you were never going to be good enough for my son, not with your background, your lack of breeding, your frankly pedestrian genetics." She smiled, and it was the cruelest expression I'd ever seen. "Martin deserves better than a charity case playing dress-up in academia. He deserves someone from his own world, someone who understands legacy and lineage and the importance of maintaining certain standards." There it was, the truth I'd known but never heard spoken so plainly. I wasn't rejected because of who I was rejected because of what I wasn't. Old money, old family, old blood, the kind of pedigree you couldn't earn through intelligence or achievement, or the sheer stubborn refusal to be broken by circumstance. "Then I suppose it's fortunate," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "that Martin made his choice 3 years ago. And I made mine. I chose to build a life that matters, to do work that saves children's lives, rather than simply writing checks to feel philanthropic. I chose meaning over money, Mrs. Raymond, purpose over position, and I've never regretted it for a single moment. It was a beautiful lie. I'd regretted it approximately 7,000 moments, usually at 3 in the morning when my apartment was too quiet and my bed too empty and my treacherous brain insisted on replaying the way Martin Raymond had looked at me before his mother had poisoned everything beautiful between us. But Vivienne didn't need to know that. I walked away, through a sea of people who suddenly found their phones, their companions, the architectural details of the ceiling absolutely fascinating. No one wanted to acknowledge what they'd witnessed. No one wanted to choose sides between the dragon who controlled half the city's charitable giving and the girl who dared to love her son. I made it to the elevator before the tears came, made it to my decade-old Honda Civic before the sob that had been building in my chest finally broke free, made it exactly 3 miles down Spear Boulevard before I had to pull over because I couldn't see through the blur. 3 years. 3 years of building a new life from the ruins of the old one. 3 years of telling myself I was fine, healed, moved on, and one encounter with Vivienne Raymond had stripped away every layer of protective scar tissue to expose the wound beneath. Still raw, still bleeding. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but researcher instincts made me accept the call. "Dr. George?" The voice was female, professional, unfamiliar. "Yes? This is Patricia Chen from Denver Memorial Hospital. I'm calling about your mother, Caroline George." My blood turned to ice water. "What happened? Is she okay?" "She's stable," the voice said quickly. "But she had a fall this evening. Possible hip fracture. We're running tests now, but Dr. Morrison wanted me to call you directly given her other conditions. The Alzheimer's, the disease that was slowly erasing my mother's brilliant mind, the mind that had raised me alone, that had worked 3 jobs to pay for my education, that had never stopped believing I could escape the poverty that had defined our lives." "I'm on my way," I said, already pulling back into traffic. The emergency room was the special kind of fluorescent hell reserved for 11 at night on a Saturday. I navigated through chaos to find my mother in a curtained bay. She looked small and confused in a hospital gown, a purple bruise already blooming across her left cheekbone. "Mom," I breathed, taking her hand. Caroline George looked up with eyes that took a moment to focus, to remember, to recognize. "Teresa? When did you get here?" Her voice carried the bewildered frustration of someone losing trust in their own mind. "I was just going somewhere." "Was I going somewhere?" "You fell, Mom, at sunrise. But you're going to be okay." "I don't remember falling." She looked at me with sudden fear. "I don't remember much anymore, do I?" "You remember the important things," I lied gently. Dr. Morrison appeared with x-rays and a prognosis. Fractured hip, surgery required, 6 weeks minimum recovery. The costs scrolled through my mind like a nightmare calculator. My insurance would cover some. My savings, carefully hoarded for exactly this kind of emergency, would cover more. But the surgery, the rehabilitation, the possibility that my mother might need more intensive care afterward. "We'll figure it out," I told my mother, who'd already drifted into a medication-induced fog. "We always do." But sitting in that curtained bay, still wearing a wine-stained gown that smelled like my own humiliation, I felt the weight of every choice I'd made, every bridge I'd burned, every door I'd closed when I'd walked away from Martin Raymond and the life his world offered. I'd chosen pride over pragmatism, integrity over ease, and now my mother would pay the price. 48 hours later, I sat in my office at the university research lab, surrounded by grant applications and medical bills and a calculator that kept displaying numbers I couldn't afford. My research assistant, Kenji, had brought me coffee and tactfully avoided asking why I looked like I'd been awake for 3 days. Because I had been. My phone rang. Another unknown number. "Dr. George, this is Rebecca Torres from the Denver Memorial Billing Department. I'm calling about Caroline George's account." Here it comes, I thought. The payment plan I couldn't afford. The gentle suggestion that perhaps I should consider the state facility. The systematic dismantling of every wall I'd built to protect my mother. "I'm aware of the charges," I said tiredly. "I'll need a few days to arrange finances, but I can commit to a payment schedule." "Dr. George," Rebecca interrupted gently, "I'm calling to inform you that the account has been settled in full. Surgery, rehabilitation, and 6 months of extended care at Sunrise's premium memory ward. All covered." My mind went blank. That's not possible. That's over $200,000. The payment came through this morning from the Martin Raymond Foundation for Medical Excellence, along with a note instructing us to ensure Caroline George receives whatever care she needs, with all costs directed to the foundation indefinitely. The room tilted. I gripped my desk to keep from falling. "There's been a mistake," I managed. "Martin Raymond wouldn't..." But even as I said it, I knew it was exactly what Martin Raymond would do. Because despite everything, despite his mother, despite the 3 years of silence, despite the way we'd ended, Martin had always been the man who showed up when it mattered, who paid attention to details that revealed character, who remembered that my greatest fear was failing to protect my mother. "There's no mistake," Rebecca said kindly. "Though there is one additional item, a request that you call this number at your earliest convenience." She recited digits that my trembling hands barely managed to write down. After the call ended, I stared at those numbers for 17 minutes. Every rational part of my brain screamed warnings. Don't engage. Don't give him an opening. Don't let him think that money can fix what his family broke. But my mother was safe. For the first time in 3 years, I could breathe without the weight of impending financial catastrophe crushing my chest. And that safety had a name, a number, a reckoning I couldn't avoid. I dialed. He answered on the first ring. Teresa, just my name. Just those 3 syllables in that voice I'd tried so hard to forget. Low and rough like whiskey over stones. A voice that had once whispered promises in the dark, had laughed at my terrible jokes, had said I love you like it was both prayer and certainty. "Why?" I asked, because anything else felt like capitulation. "Your mother deserves the best care available. That's not negotiable. I didn't ask for your help. I know. You never do. You'd set yourself on fire before asking for help." He paused, and I heard something in that silence. Weight, regret, longing. I heard about the Gala, what my mother did. "Your mother has made her feelings about me abundantly clear for 3 years, Martin. This wasn't new information. It was unconscionable. And I'm sorry. For her behavior. For not being there. For..." He stopped, struggling with words. Martin Raymond, who commanded boardrooms and negotiated billion-dollar deals with effortless precision, struggling. "For everything. For all of it. Your apology doesn't change anything. I know that too." Another pause, heavier than the first. "Can I see you? Just to talk. No expectations, no strings. I just need to see that you're okay." "I'm fine," I lied. "You were wearing your mother's vintage Chanel." The specificity of the observation hit me like a physical blow. The one she wore to her master's thesis defense in 1987. You told me once that you only wore it when you needed armor, when you needed to feel like you came from somewhere, from someone who mattered. Damn him. Damn him for remembering details I'd shared in the vulnerable dark when I'd believed loving him was safe. That doesn't give you the right to. I'm not claiming rights, Martin interrupted quietly. I'm asking for a chance. One conversation. After that, if you want me to disappear, I will. I'll make sure your mother's care continues anonymously. You'll never have to see me again. Before we continue with what happened next, before I tell you about the conversation that changed everything, I need to pause and speak directly to you. If you're still watching, it means something about this story resonates with you. Maybe you've been in Teresa's position, humiliated by someone who thought they were better than you. Maybe you've been Martin, trying to prove you've changed after making the worst mistake of your life. Whatever brought you here, I want you to hit that like button right now. Share this with someone who needs to hear that survival is possible after devastation. Subscribe to Mr. Kingsley Luck's stories and turn on notifications because this journey is just beginning. And the twist that's coming, the DNA revelation that changes everything, you absolutely cannot miss it. Drop a comment telling me, should Teresa give Martin another chance, or is she setting herself up for more heartbreak? Your voice matters here. Now, back to that phone call. Back to the decision that would reshape 3 lives forever. I closed my eyes. I should say no. Should protect myself the way I'd learned to do, building walls high enough that no one could climb them, thick enough that nothing could penetrate them. I should remember that Martin Raymond had chosen his mother's approval over me, had let Vivienne destroy us without fighting back, had proven that when forced to choose between love and legacy, legacy won. But my mother was safe, and I owed him at least the courtesy of a conversation for that, if nothing else. One conversation, I agreed. Tomorrow, 2 in the afternoon. The Botanic Gardens, public, neutral territory. I'll be there. The line went dead. I sat in the silence of my office, surrounded by the evidence of the life I'd built without him. My research, my grants, my reputation as one of the most promising pediatric neuroscientists in the country. I'd built an empire from rubble, had proven that Vivienne Raymond's assessment of my worth was poison, not prophecy. But facing Martin again would require armor I wasn't sure I still possessed. Part 2, 2,500 words. He was early. I saw him from a distance, standing near the Japanese Gardens moon bridge with his hands in the pockets of casual slacks that probably cost more than my monthly rent. At 38, Martin Raymond had aged the way wealthy men do, which is to say barely at all, except for the silver threading through his dark hair, except for the lines bracketing his mouth that hadn't been there 3 years ago, lines that looked like they'd been carved by regret. He turned when my footsteps crunched on gravel. Our eyes met across 30 feet of carefully maintained garden, across 3 years of silence, across the ruins of everything we'd been. You came, he said when I reached him. I said I would. You also said you'd never speak to me again. I wasn't sure which promise would win. Fair point. I had said that. Screamed it actually during our last conversation when he'd stood in his mother's study and told me that maybe we were moving too fast. Maybe we needed to slow down. Maybe the differences in our backgrounds were more significant than we'd thought. All of it his mother's poison, delivered in his mouth, killing us with words he'd never have spoken if Vivienne hadn't spent 6 months systematically destroying his faith in what we had. Why did you pay for my mother's care? I asked, because small talk felt impossible. Because you shouldn't have to choose between your work and her well-being. Because the money means nothing to me and everything to you. Because it was the right thing to do. Your mother sits on the Sunrise board. She'll find out. I know. I'm counting on it. His jaw tightened. What she did at the gala was unforgivable. I've tolerated her interference in my life for too long. That ends now. You didn't feel that way 3 years ago. The blow landed. I watched him absorb it. Watched something that looked like pain flicker across his carefully controlled features. No, he agreed quietly. 3 years ago, I was a coward. I let her convince me that loving you was a liability, that your background would damage the family reputation, that we came from different worlds and those worlds could never reconcile. I let her poison what we had because I was too afraid to stand up to her. And what changed? Everything. He gestured to a nearby bench. Will you sit? This is going to take more than a few minutes. Against my better judgment, I sat. Martin settled beside me, careful to maintain distance. His body angled toward me like I was something precious he was afraid to touch. After we ended, he began. I tried to do what my mother wanted. Dated Juliet Ashford. Let Vivienne orchestrate this fantasy of dynastic marriage between two appropriate families. Went through the motions of being the son she'd always wanted instead of the man I actually was. How very dutiful of you. It was hell. His laugh held no humor. Juliet was perfectly pleasant, perfectly appropriate, perfectly wrong. Because she wasn't you. No one was you. And every day I spent pretending otherwise was another day wasted on a life that looked right but felt empty. So you ended it with Juliet. I ended all of it. The performance, the pretense, the letting my mother dictate who I was supposed to be. 2 years ago I told Vivienne that my personal life was no longer subject to her approval, that I would make my own choices, marry who I wanted, if I ever wanted to marry anyone again. And if she couldn't accept that, she could remove me from the Raymond legacy entirely. I studied him, looking for the lie, the performance, the manipulation, but his eyes held only exhausted honesty. What did she say? She threatened exactly what you'd expect. Disinheritance, public scandal, using her influence to damage my business interests. And I told her to do her worst, because I'd spent 2 years learning that money without autonomy is just an expensive prison. Very inspiring, but it doesn't explain why you're here now, 3 years later, suddenly interested in my well-being. I've been interested in your well-being every single day for 3 years. He held my gaze. I know about your grant from the Children's Hospital Foundation, your paper on pediatric neural plasticity, published in The Lancet last year, your promotion to lead the Traumatic Brain Injury Research Division. I know you take your coffee black with exactly 1 sugar, that you still run at dawn through Cheeseman Park, that your mother's condition has been deteriorating faster than the doctors initially projected. The invasion of privacy should have felt threatening. Instead, it felt like being seen, really seen, by the only person who'd ever bothered to look beneath my armor to the woman underneath. You've been stalking me. I've been loving you from a distance, Martin corrected, respecting your clear desire for no contact while making sure you were okay, making sure you had what you needed, even if you didn't know it came from me. What does that mean? He had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. The Hopkins grant for women in STEM that funded your research lab's expansion last year? My foundation administered it. The anonymous donor who covered the Sunrise premium care costs before your mother's fall. Also me, the mysterious benefactor who paid off your medical school loan 6 months ago. You're seeing a pattern here. My hands clenched in my lap. You had no right to. I know, but I couldn't let you struggle when I had the means to help. Call it penance. Call it love that doesn't know how to quit. Call it whatever you want. I won't apologize for making your life easier, even if you never knew I was doing it. I don't want your money, Martin. I'm not offering money. I'm offering partnership, support, the thing I should have given you 3 years ago, instead of letting my mother's classist poison convince me we were impossible. I stood abruptly, needing distance, needing to think, without his proximity scrambling my thoughts. You don't get to do this. You don't get to swoop in after 3 years of silence and expect me to just fall back into your arms because you finally grew a spine. No, Martin agreed, standing but not approaching. I don't expect anything, but I'm asking, begging if necessary, for a chance to prove I'm not the man who let you down. I'm asking for the opportunity to show you that I've changed, that I've done the work to become someone worthy of you. People don't change, Martin, not fundamentally. You'll always be Vivienne Raymond's son. You'll always come from a world where people like me don't belong. You're wrong. His voice carried absolute conviction. People can change if they're willing to do the brutal work of examining every assumption, every inherited prejudice, every comfortable lie they've told themselves. I've spent 3 years doing exactly that. Therapy, hard conversations, dismantling the classist framework I was raised in. I can't change my background, but I can change what I do with it, how I wield privilege, whether I let old money poison new possibilities. Pretty words, I observed. But I've heard your pretty words before. They didn't mean much when you chose your mother over me. Then let me show you through actions. Let me prove over time with consistency that I mean every word I'm saying. My phone buzzed. Text from Kenji. Emergency. Lab situation. Need you ASAP. I have to go, I said, grateful for the escape. Work crisis. Can the first drive you? We could continue talking. No. The word came out harder than intended. This was already more than I planned to give you. I need space to process. Martin nodded, visibly fighting the urge to push. Can I call you? Text? Send a carrier pigeon? Despite everything, I felt my mouth twitch toward a smile. No carrier pigeons. But you can text. Maybe. If the content is actually important and not just attempts to wear down my defenses, I'll take maybe. The hope in his voice was almost painful to hear. Teresa, before you go, thank you for giving me this conversation, for not throwing your coffee at me, for being willing to even consider the possibility that people can change. I haven't decided whether I believe that yet, I warned. But you haven't decided you don't believe it either. That's enough for now. The proving started the next morning. I arrived at the lab to find a bag from my favorite bakery, the small Ethiopian place 3 miles off campus that I'd mentioned exactly once, 2 years into our relationship, as having the best sambusas in Denver. Inside were still warm sambusas, fresh mango juice, and a handwritten note. I remembered you had a grant review meeting this morning. Figured you could use fuel. No grand gestures, no expensive gifts, just attention paid to details that revealed he'd been listening, remembering, caring even when I hadn't known he was there. It was more terrifying than flowers would have been. 3 days later, a text. Your paper on neuroplasticity in pediatric TBI patients was brilliant. The methodology section alone should be required reading for anyone in the field. Congratulations on the peer recognition. I'd published that paper 8 months ago. He'd clearly read it. Actually read it, not just skimmed the abstract, and understood the work enough to offer substantive commentary. Then, a week later, I know you're running the hospital's charity 5K this weekend. Would it be okay if I registered and ran it too? I'll stay out of your way. I just want to support the cause. I should have said no. Should have maintained boundaries. But the race benefited the pediatric neurology department, and I couldn't deny them donations because my ex wanted to participate. Do what you want, I texted back. It's a public race. He showed up in running gear that was well worn, not purchased for the occasion. Stayed exactly far enough back that I saw him but didn't have to interact with him. And when I crossed the finish line with a personal best time, I caught him watching from the sidelines. Pride written across his features like I'd accomplished something extraordinary instead of just running 3 miles without dying. He didn't approach, didn't try to turn my achievement into an opportunity for conversation. Just met my eyes across the crowd, nodded once, and left. That restraint, that respect for my space even when he clearly wanted to close the distance, cracked something in my chest. The pattern continued for weeks. Martin showed up, but never pushed. Supported, but didn't demand recognition. Made himself useful without making himself unavoidable. He was consistent in a way the younger version of himself had never managed, showing the kind of patient endurance that suggested this wasn't performance but genuine transformation. 6 weeks after our conversation in the Botanic Gardens, I found myself actually looking forward to his texts, the daily check-ins that asked about my work. My mother's progress. Caroline was thriving in the memory ward, more stable than she'd been in years. My life. He shared pieces of his own world, business challenges, foundation work, his own therapy sessions where he was dismantling inherited narcissism one painful realization at a time. His vulnerability was strategic, I told myself, a calculated move to lower my defenses. But it felt real. 2 months in, Vivienne Raymond made her countermove. I was in the lab when the university's Dean of Research, Dr. Patricia Morrison, appeared with an expression that meant nothing good. We need to talk, Patricia said. My office. Now. The walk across campus felt like a death march. In Patricia's office, I found myself facing a woman who'd been a mentor and advocate for 3 years, now looking deeply uncomfortable. I'm going to be direct, Patricia said. I received a call this morning from Vivienne Raymond. She's threatening to pull the Raymond Foundation's funding from the university. We're talking $20 million annually, unless we reconsider certain personnel decisions in the research division. The bottom dropped out of my stomach. She wants you to fire me. She didn't say it that explicitly, but the implication was clear. She raised concerns about potential conflicts of interest, about whether personal relationships between Raymond Foundation grant recipients and family members might compromise research integrity. Patricia's expression was pure disgust. It's nonsense, and we both know it. Your research is impeccable. But Teresa, I have to be honest. $20 million funds 17 labs and 43 researchers. The board is going to pressure me to consider her concerns, so I'm out. No. Patricia's voice turned to steel. You're not. Because I don't negotiate with terrorists, even if they come wrapped in Chanel suits and philanthropic credentials. But I wanted you to know what we're facing, and I wanted to ask if there's anything I should know about your relationship with Martin Raymond. I explained everything. The history, the breakup, the recent cautious reconnection, the fact that Martin had been funding my work anonymously without my knowledge, which probably violated several ethical guidelines even if the research itself was sound. The ethics review took 3 weeks, every grant examined, every funding source traced, every possible conflict of interest investigated. In the end, the committee concluded what I already knew. My research was awarded purely on merit. My work was exemplary, and the anonymous donations had been administered through proper blind review processes. The university stood by me. Vivienne pulled the funding anyway. $20 million. Gone. 17 labs scrambling for alternative resources. 43 researchers facing potential job losses. All because I had dared to love Vivienne Raymond's son and was daring to do so again. The guilt was crushing. I was in my office, staring at budget projections that showed my lab's funding evaporating in 6 months, when Martin appeared in my doorway. You shouldn't be here, I said tiredly. You're the reason I'm radioactive. I'm the reason you have a job, Martin corrected, stepping inside and closing the door. I just met with Dean Morrison. The Raymond Foundation is restoring all funding, at the previous level plus an additional $5 million, with one condition. Of course there is. That my mother is removed from any role in funding allocation decisions, that all grants are awarded by independent review panels with no Raymond family involvement beyond writing the checks, and that the university publicly commits to resisting donor pressure on personnel decisions. My head snapped up. You're buying me a job. I'm buying the university's integrity, Martin corrected, and ensuring my mother can never weaponize philanthropy against you again. The funding isn't contingent on your employment. It's contingent on the university refusing to let donors dictate who they hire or fire based on personal vendettas. Vivienne will never agree to this. Vivienne doesn't have a choice. I control the foundation. I've controlled it since my father died 5 years ago. She's always believed she had influence over how I administered it, and I let her believe that because it was easier than constant conflict. That ends now. He paused, his voice rough with barely contained emotion. She attempted to destroy your career out of spite. I'm ensuring she can never do that again. To you or anyone else. He stepped closer. Teresa, I failed you 3 years ago. I let her destroy us because I was too cowardly to stand up to her. I'm not making that mistake again. She doesn't get to hurt you. Not ever again. Not while I'm alive. The declaration should have felt possessive. Instead, it felt like safety. She'll never forgive you for this, I said quietly. Good. I'm done seeking her approval. Done letting her toxicity dictate my choices. Done sacrificing what matters to maintain a relationship with someone who loves control more than she loves me. You're choosing me over your mother. I'm choosing myself, Martin corrected. The version of myself who has principles and boundaries and refuses to enable narcissistic abuse. You're not an either-or proposition, Teresa. You're the person I should have chosen 3 years ago. The person I'm choosing now, and will keep choosing, if you'll let me. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Unknown number. Again. Dr. George? This is Dr. Amanda Reeves from the Sunrise Care Memory Ward. I'm calling about your mother. My blood froze. What happened? She's fine, Dr. Reeves said quickly. More than fine, actually. I'm calling because we ran some routine cognitive assessments this morning, and the results are unusual. Her scores have improved significantly over the past 2 months. We'd like to run additional tests, but preliminary results suggest her condition may not be early onset Alzheimer's as originally diagnosed. The room tilted. What else could it be? We're seeing markers consistent with cognitive impairment, secondary to chronic malnutrition and vitamin deficiency, specifically B12 deficiency, which can mimic dementia symptoms but is actually treatable and potentially reversible with proper supplementation and nutrition. I couldn't breathe, couldn't process. For 2 years I'd been grieving my mother's gradual disappearance into the fog of Alzheimer's. Had been preparing myself for the inevitable progression, the day when Caroline George wouldn't remember her own daughter's name, And it might have been preventable, reversible, if I'd just had the resources to get her proper care sooner. The premium care ward has been providing optimized nutrition and vitamin protocols as standard practice, Dr. Reeves continued. Your mother's response has been remarkable. We'll know more after additional testing, but Dr. George, I wanted you to have this information immediately, because if our hypothesis is correct, your mother may regain significant cognitive function with continued treatment. The call ended. I stood in my office, phone clutched in a hand that had gone numb, tears streaming down my face that I didn't remember starting to cry. Teresa? Martin's voice, close and concerned. What is it? I told him everything. The diagnosis that had haunted me for 2 years. The guilt of not being able to afford better care sooner. The crushing weight of watching my mother disappear piece by piece. And now this, the possibility that the premium care he'd funded might have saved not just her comfort, but her mind. She might get better, I whispered. Because of you. Because you paid for care I couldn't afford. You gave her everything, Martin said fiercely. You gave her love and dedication and fought for her when no one else would. I just provided resources. That's not the same thing. But it was. Resources mattered. Money mattered. Not because it bought happiness, but because it bought options, possibilities, futures that poverty made impossible. I'd spent 3 years telling myself that loving Martin had been a mistake, that his world and hers were incompatible, that the differences in our backgrounds were insurmountable obstacles rather than details that only mattered if you let them. I'd been protecting myself from disappointment by refusing to hope. But Martin was standing in my office, having just gone to war with his own mother to protect my career, having funded 2 years of care that might have saved Caroline George's mind, having shown up consistently, patiently, proving through actions that he was no longer the man who'd let me down. I'm terrified, I admitted. Of what? Of believing you. Of letting myself hope that this is real and permanent and won't be taken away the moment I trust it. Of loving you again and discovering I was wrong to give you another chance. I can't promise I'll never make mistakes, Martin said quietly. I can't guarantee I'll get everything right. But Teresa, I can promise you this. I will never choose someone else's approval over you again. I will never let external pressure dictate whether you're worthy of love. I will show up every single day and do the work of being someone you can trust, not because you need me. You've proven you don't. But because I need you. Because my life without you has been successful and empty and lonely in ways that money can't fix. I need time, I said. More time to believe this is real. To trust that you won't wake up one day and decide I'm too much work. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. Over the following months, Martin proved it. He proved it when Caroline's cognitive function did indeed improve dramatically with treatment, and he sat with me in her room while she told stories from my childhood that everyone had feared were lost forever. He proved it when Vivienne attempted to turn Denver's social elite against him for betraying family, and he responded by publicly resigning from every board and committee his mother controlled. He proved it when my research lab was featured in the New York Times, and he showed up with champagne and pride, asking me to explain the work like he actually cared about the science, not just the achievement. 6 months after our conversation in the Botanic Gardens, we were having dinner at a restaurant that was nice, but not ostentatious, when Martin's expression turned serious. I need to tell you something, he said, and I want you to hear it before it becomes public knowledge. My stomach clenched. What? I've filed formal paperwork to legally separate the Raymond Foundation from my mother's influence. She's being removed as board chair. The foundation is being restructured with independent governance to ensure family conflicts of interest never again interfere with ethical grant-making. She'll be furious. She already is. I told her this morning. She called me a traitor to the family legacy, said I was throwing away everything my father built, threatened to publicly disown me. He took my hand across the table. I told her that if loving you meant being disowned, I'd accept that consequence. That I choose you. Unequivocally. Publicly. Permanently. Martin, I'm not finished. I'm also selling the family mansion, the one I inherited from my father, the one I've been living in alone like some tragic figure in a Gothic novel. I'm selling it because it's full of my mother's poison and old expectations. I'm buying a house here in Denver. Nothing ostentatious. Just a real home in a good neighborhood where I can build a life that matters instead of a life that looks impressive. My throat tightened. You're choosing Denver. Permanently. I'm choosing you. The Denver part is just logistics. His thumb traced circles on the back of my hand. Teresa, I spent 3 years learning who I am without you, and I learned that I'm capable, successful, and profoundly lonely. I've spent the last 6 months learning who I am with you, and I'm happier, better, more myself than I've ever been. You're not a relationship I'm trying to fit into my life. You're the life I'm building everything else around. I love you, I said, the words surprising me as they emerged. I've tried not to. I've tried to protect myself, to maintain walls, to insist this was just friendship or anything other than what it actually is. But I love you. Still. Again. More than before, because I know what it costs you now to choose me. The smile that broke across Martin's face was incandescent. Say it again. I love you, Martin Raymond. Despite my better judgment and every self-protective instinct, I love you. He stood, pulled me to my feet, and kissed me in the middle of the restaurant like I was oxygen and he'd been drowning. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Martin pressed his forehead to hers. Marry me, he said. What? Not now. Not until you're ready. Until you trust that this is permanent and real, and I'll never give you reason to doubt it again. But eventually, when you believe it, marry me. Let me spend the rest of my life proving you didn't make a mistake by giving me another chance. I laughed through tears. That's the least romantic proposal I've ever heard. I know. I'm working on it. I'll do better when it's official. I don't want skywriting. I just want you, the real you, not the performance version. The man who shows up when it's boring, who stays when it's hard, who chooses me over everything else. That's who I am now, Martin promised. That's who I'll keep being. A year later, I stood in the same museum gallery where Vivienne Raymond had humiliated me. But tonight, the space was transformed for an event honoring me. The Emerging Researcher Award from the National Pediatric Neurology Society. My work on reversible cognitive impairment had changed diagnostic protocols nationwide, saving countless patients from misdiagnoses similar to my mother's. Martin stood beside me, his hand at the small of my back, radiating quiet pride. Caroline was there too, recovered enough to attend and understand that her daughter was being celebrated. Across the room, I saw Vivienne Raymond. She'd arrived late, apparently unable to resist a major social event even though her son was publicly partnered with the woman she'd tried to destroy. Our eyes met. Vivienne's expression was cold, assessing. I smiled. Not triumphant, just content. I'd won, but not through revenge. I'd won by being excellent, by refusing to let her poison define my worth, by building a life that mattered regardless of who approved of it. Vivienne looked away first. That night, in Martin's new house, a beautiful craftsman in Wash Park with a front porch and a garden and none of his mother's influence in its walls, we sat on the back deck watching stars emerge. I have something for you, Martin said, pulling out a small box. My heart stuttered. If that's what I think it is, open it first. Inside was a ring, not a diamond solitaire in the expected platinum setting. Instead, a custom piece featuring 3 stones, sapphire, emerald, ruby, set in a delicate gold band with engraving inside that read, "Worth fighting for." It's not an engagement ring, Martin said carefully. It's a promise ring. A promise that when I do officially propose, it'll be because you're absolutely certain. Because you trust this completely. Because you want it as much as I do. This is just a marker. A reminder that I'm committed, patient, willing to wait as long as you need. I slipped the ring on my right hand. Perfect fit. Ask me, I said. What? Ask me now. Officially. Because I am certain. I do trust this. And I want forever with you, Martin Raymond. Not someday, but now. His hands trembled as he took the ring back, moved it to my left hand, and dropped to one knee. Teresa George, you're the smartest, strongest, most remarkable person I've ever known. You survived my worst failures and gave me the chance to become better. You built an empire from nothing, saved your mother, changed your field, and refused to let anyone, including me, tell you that you weren't enough. I love you with everything I am and everything I'm becoming. Will you marry me? Build a life with me? Let me spend forever proving you made the right choice? Yes, I breathed. Yes to all of it. Later that night, lying in bed with my head on Martin's chest, my phone buzzed with an email. The DNA testing service I'd used to confirm my mother's B12 deficiency markers had sent results I'd forgotten I'd ordered. Comprehensive ancestry testing that Caroline had consented to during her recovery. I opened the file out of idle curiosity and froze. The results showed something impossible. Caroline George wasn't just English and Irish as we'd always assumed. There was significant DNA overlap with a reference sample in the database, a match showing first-degree relationship, parent-child level connection, to someone named Victoria Ashford. I sat bolt upright. Teresa? Martin's concerned voice seemed distant. What is it? Victoria Ashford was Vivienne Raymond's younger sister, which meant Caroline George, born Caroline Ashford before she'd legally changed her name at 18, was Vivienne's niece, which meant I was Vivienne's grandniece. Raymond family bloodline, the very pedigree Vivienne had insisted I lacked. The truth unfolded like a nightmare. Caroline had run away from the Ashford family at 18, pregnant and desperate to escape a controlling family that valued reputation over humanity. She'd changed her name, built a new life, never told me about the family she'd left behind, never told me that the woman who'd spent 3 years calling me genetically inferior was actually my own blood. Vivienne had destroyed my relationship with Martin to preserve family purity, and I had been family the entire time. I need to tell you something, I said, about my family, about yours, about a DNA test that changes everything. As I explained, watching Martin's expression cycle through shock to anger to something that might have been vindication, I began to laugh, because the universe had a sense of irony, and sometimes justice came not through revenge but through truth revealed too late to change the damage done but perfectly timed to prove just how wrong the powerful could be. The next morning, we requested a meeting with Vivienne in her study, the Lion's Den, which brings us back to where we started, the DNA report on the mahogany desk, Vivienne's face draining of color, the question hanging in the air like an indictment. Would it have mattered? I asked again. If you'd known then that I was your sister's granddaughter, would any of it have been different? Or did you reject me for being poor, not for lacking the bloodline you claimed to value? Vivienne's silence was answer enough. I didn't come here for an apology, I said quietly. I came to give you information. What you do with it is your choice. You can reach out to your niece, my mother, the sister you haven't spoken to in 30 years. You can acknowledge that your cruelty was based on classist assumptions that were factually wrong. You can choose family over pride, or you can stay exactly as you are, alone in this mansion, estranged from your son, clinging to standards that only isolated you from everyone who might have loved you. I stood. Martin stood with me. We're getting married in 6 months, Martin said to his mother. Teresa has graciously agreed to extend you an invitation, not because you deserve one, but because she believes in second chances for people willing to change. The question is whether you're willing. We left Vivienne sitting at her desk, the DNA report in front of her. A woman who'd spent 3 years trying to destroy me for not being good enough, only to discover I was exactly what she'd claimed I wasn't. Did we do the right thing? I asked Martin as we drove away. Telling her? You did the right thing, Martin said. You offered grace she didn't earn. What she does with it is her choice. 6 months later, on our wedding day, Caroline walked me down the aisle, healthy, present, remembering. The small ceremony was filled with chosen family, research colleagues, foundation beneficiaries, people who mattered. There was one empty seat in the front row, reserved for Vivienne Raymond. She didn't come, but 3 days after the wedding, a letter arrived, handwritten, brief. Teresa, I was wrong. About you, about what matters, about family. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I'm trying to change. I've reached out to Caroline. We're talking, slowly. It may be too late to repair what I broke, but I'm trying. Vivienne, it wasn't an apology. Not quite, but it was a beginning. I showed the letter to Martin. People can change, he said quietly, if they're willing to do the work. Yes, I agreed. They can, and so I want to leave you with this. The woman who spent 3 years being told she wasn't good enough turned out to be exactly what her tormentor claimed she wasn't. But here's the real lesson. I didn't need that DNA test to prove my worth. I'd already proven it through my work, my integrity, my refusal to let someone else's cruelty define my value. If this story moved you, if you believe in second chances and karma and the power of truth, hit that like button right now. Share this with someone who needs to hear that your worth isn't determined by who accepts you. Subscribe to Mr. Kingsley Luck's stories for more narratives about real people navigating impossible situations. And drop a comment telling me, Do you think Teresa should have told Vivienne the truth or kept it to herself? Your voice matters here. This story teaches us 3 things. First, worth is inherent, not assigned. My value didn't change when the DNA results came in. I was always worthy. Vivienne was just blind to it. Second chances require real change. Martin didn't just apologize. He restructured his entire life, set boundaries with his mother, and proved through consistent action that he'd transformed. Third, cruelty has consequences. Vivienne's viciousness didn't just hurt me. It isolated her, cost her the relationship with her son, and revealed her own hollowness. The most powerful revenge isn't destruction. It's building a life so full of meaning that your tormentor's opinion becomes irrelevant. That's what I did. That's what you can do too. Until next time, choose people who choose you, build lives that matter, and never let anyone convince you that your worth is up for debate.